Hello and welcome to 365 Days of Healing. Well, I'm on a new computer and I'm not 100% sure what I'm doing sometimes, but anyway, that's good. It's good to have change and it makes life exciting. We're just not in the humdrum of day-to-day living, are we, when we explore and experience new things. Today's theme that I thought I'd talk about is about loss and grief. It is a huge subject, and it's a subject that is very difficult for us to come to terms with, particularly when we are new to the experience of loss. Now, loss can come in many different forms. It's not just when we lose loved ones or people that we know. It can come at a very early age when we are abandoned or betrayed, neglected, or abused. And it sets the patterning of grief in our psyche, and it is a very difficult one, as I say, to come to terms with. When we understand what grief is about and when we understand how to approach what is happening to us, it sometimes makes it easier. And I say sometimes because sometimes we get caught in very different parts of the grieving process. Now, there are stages of grieving. Now, we don't necessarily have to go through all stages, but sometimes we can get stuck in one or more of those stages. And the process can be very, very protracted and long. We can bring grief in with us from past lives, and we have to come to terms with it in this lifetime. So there's an underlying sadness that we are left with when we have brought it in with us. Each of us have our own levels of understanding as to what that means, and the experience that we have in our day-to-day lives often stops us expressing and feeling the depths of the grief that has come from loss means to us. We put off the grieving process, in other words, because we're too busy doing instead of sitting in our emotional self. And after all, we are here in this 3D template, and we are a soul having this experience, and this is one of the experiences that we feel. Now, often when we lose something, we lose a loved one, say, the first reaction, or we have a breakdown in relationship, the first reaction very often is one of shock, where we don't really comprehend what is going on. This is a natural process, and it is because things are so overwhelming for us that we actually have a mechanism within us that blocks the emotional self. So we walk around like we're an automated personality. We don't really act and react in our normal manner. We are in a state of shock. We have changes physiologically when that occurs. So that's very often the first stage of grief, especially if we've lost somebody or a relationship very suddenly and very quickly, and we haven't had time to come to terms with what it means to lose a loved one or a very important relationship in our world. So the second stage very often is one of bargaining, and we're bargaining with universal energies, we're bargaining with the higher powers, we're bargaining with anything to try and make things change for us. So we often go, if only I had done this, if only they had, if only, what this wouldn't have happened, if only something else had occurred, if only somebody hadn't precipitated this event happening. So we're in a bargaining situation where we're trying to ask the universe, ask the higher power to intervene on our behalf. Um, when we are confronted by our own movement towards the end of our life, we often go into that shock and then bargaining. You know, if I do this, can you save my life? If I do that, can you change the outcome of what is happening? So we bargain. And that's very real, because sometimes when we are have a terminal illness, we may need to address our emotional selves and what has taken us down the track of coming to the end of our life. And there will be multiple layers of why that is occurring. At a soul level, it's because we are transitioning, and we all transition anyway to the other side of what dying is about. So the bargaining is very much a part of what occurs. Um, After that, and we're in a state of denial as to what's happened. We can't come to terms, and as I say, we go into this bargaining with a higher power. I'm just reading some of the notes I have here. The thing is, it's an illusion when we bargain, because when something has happened and something has come to an end and we have actually lost something, it and somebody, there is no bringing them back per se. Now, there are miracles that happen, of course there are. So, you know, I won't discount miracles happening, because in short spans of time, miracles can occur. All right. So when we suddenly go in from that bargaining, we can very often move into anger and guilt. Guilt that we didn't do enough, guilt that we have been a bad person, and that's what's caused this loss in our life. And then that can be replaced by anger. And we're very angry. We're angry at God. We're angry at the universe. We're angry at everybody around us because this has happened. And then this often then translates to, when that doesn't serve us, this then translates into a depressed state. Now, in this depressed state, where everything just seems to overwhelm us, but we are consciously being overwhelmed, we very often can look to the use of drugs in one form or another, whether it's pharmaceutical drugs, whether it's alcohol, whether it's we'll call them illegal drugs, whether it's back smoking if we've been a smoker, and we whether it's overeating or over shopping. Addictive behaviours very often come with that state of depression that we feel when we recognise that we can't do anything about changing what has occurred. So then through that, we then move to the recognition that this is reality, that we have lost something very dear to us, and that reality creates what we call the dark night of the soul, because there's nothing we can do about it. No amount of addiction, no amount of anger, no amount of guilt, no amount of bargaining, no amount of anything is going to change what has occurred. And so we get into a state where we are in a state of angst. We can't change it. There's nothing we can do about it. And then from there, when we give up, that when we've gone through the depths of that despair of the loss, we actually will will then move into surrendering and accepting what has happened. And I'll just say this, when we have this depth of grief that comes from loss, and loss from many different areas of our life, loss of security, loss of our parents, loss of loved ones, loss of our own innocence, loss of our own integrity, that can create real angst and grief in us. Of course it can. Just any sort of loss that you can recognize, it is important that we understand that the grief, the process of grieving, is going to very much be a part of our world. But once we accept it, we then have the ability to understand that the grief that we are feeling, the upset we are feeling, is because we have loved, and we have loved deeply. And when we have loved deeply, the greater the sense of grief that we will feel. So thank you for listening. I hope this has helped to allay some of the symptoms that you feel when you are grieving, and I will talk again to you at a later time. Namaste, my friends.